Right, so as I said, having moved it, the brakes seem to be binding on. Now on this side, we're all right. We're moving quite freely. Certainly within the tolerance you would expect, given that it hasn't been on the road for a while. There's probably a bit of sort of crust on the brake disc, but this side does not want to move. So what I'm going to do is pull the wheel off and we'll have a good look at the caliper. And like I say, this will be a good opportunity to find out what the front clip is off as well. So yeah, I'm going to get the wheel off and have a look. All right, so I've taken the caliper off the brakes and you can see that it rolls freely without that on, which is good news. It means, you know, bearings and stuff like that are all good. And it means that the caliper has seized on somehow. So what I need to do now is have a bit of an investigation of this. I'll probably disconnect it and pull it off and have a good look. But what I can do now is pull off a brake pad. All the pads look new. The disc, you know, is well within tolerance. Doesn't look very old, other than just kind of natural rust and stuff, but that's all good. It's not ridged or anything like that. I'd say it's fairly new, and the brake pads, like I say, look brand new as well. So I think it is going to be a case of me pushing the caliper in and seeing if I can get it moving again, basically, because I mean this bit where it slides as well was all gummed up, so it might be that if I clean this all up so it slides more freely, that might help us too. So yeah, I'm going to have a good look at that and see what's been going on. I've removed the caliper from the wheel that was seized. Tried to look for part numbers on it and can't find anything, although it is a Ford part. There's nothing in the way of part numbers, which is disappointing because I was hoping this would help me identify what the whole front clip is from. But nonetheless, what I'm going to do is look at doing some work on this. So I put it in the vise and squeezed the piston in a bit, and it did move. But what we want to do is make sure that that brake piston is moving freely in here, because obviously it's got bound up. So what I'm going to do, I want to pop the piston out so I can inspect the O-ring and potentially clean it up if there's any sort of rubbish and dirt within there as well that's stopping it moving freely. It might well be that just the bits that it was sliding, that it's supposed to slide on, were crudded up, so I'm going to clean those up as well. But if you want to pop a brake caliper, the best way to do it is to pop it on a bench like this, put the brake pad back in, and then get an airline and basically fire air into the hole where the brake line goes. So normally that would be brake fluid going in there. We're going to do it with air, and obviously without having the other brake pad and the brake disc in, it will overextend and pop out of the piston, in theory. So I've done this a few times. It's a lot of fun, makes a bit of a mess, but let's give it a go. And if it doesn't move, then we know that the caliper is well and truly seized. So let's give one that's not a tight seal, unfortunately. Moved a little bit then. Could do with something to just tighten that seal up. Let me try and find something to tighten that up. Okay, so the end of the airline here wasn't big enough to fill the hole, so I didn't have a tight enough seal to blow the air through. So I've just got a little rubber grommet. I'm going to stick it on the end there and hope that's enough to seal the hole and allow the air pressure to build up and blow the pipe out. So let me just put my gloves back on so I don't end up hurting myself. Safety first and all that. Let's have a look. Fingers crossed this works. There we go. So I've stripped down the caliper now and I've given it a good clean out. And I think that we should be able to, like I say, make it good. Annoyingly, I've still not managed to find any kind of identification. I've asked on the internet. I've spent literally an hour and a half scrolling through images of calipers to try and find it. If anyone recognizes what this might be from, it's, like I say, it's a Ford part. It has E6 on it there and L14, but no amount of internet searching has thrown up at anything. And I've just not been able to find it. So frustrating. So I'm going to keep looking, but in the meantime, I think the problem, this is the seal that sits in there. in there that seals the piston into the caliper, and you can see that it's been, I don't know if that shows up, but you can see that it's been snagged, it's turned, it's twisted. So what that might well have been doing is snagging the piston, so it wasn't moving freely. That the piston should move very freely through that seal. So I've measured the piston with a caliper, a vernier caliper, and I've ordered a seal that will fit that. In the meantime, I'm still going to try and work out what it is, because I'd like to replace this boot as well, although it's okay, and I do have some rubber reviver stuff which is pretty good, so I might be able to salvage this, clean it up, bring it back to life a bit, and pop that back in, and then use a new seal. But I think other than that, I'll give it a bit more of a clean, but I think we can rebuild this caliper. I just really wanted to find out what it was from, so I'll keep looking a bit longer, but we've got a solution anyway if I can't find anything. Okay, there we go. So I managed to get the piston in there past the seal. It's moving quite nicely, enough sort of resistance, but confident that will move cleanly and not snag up again. And that's effectively, I've done that, and we've obviously put a new bleed nipple on it already, and that's a caliper rebuild. It's a really simple thing to do. I did mention it might be worth buying a new caliper because they're quite cheap. Sometimes you find on American vehicles, if you look on Rock Auto, the new seals, etc., might be $10. A new caliper might be $20, and in that instance, you might as well just get the new caliper. But in this instance, getting a new caliper wasn't possible, so rebuild it, and it's as good as new-ish. But yeah, certainly going to be able to do the job of stopping the vehicle. So I'll throw that back on, and hopefully that means our wheels will now be moving nice and freely as they should. All right, back under the car. So I'm just going to clean up. These are the surfaces. It's a floating caliper, so the caliper moves backwards and forwards on these. So the piston pushes one side, and then the caliper pulls in as well to push the pads onto the brake disc. So I'm just going to clean these up and just put a little bit of copper slip on those, just to make sure the caliper is able to move freely on those. I've done the same on the caliper on the same surfaces. And that will just hopefully mean the brakes will operate well. So just clean up any rust and rubbish that's built up on them surfaces. Okay. What I do is just get a bit of copper grease on those as well. It's just anti-seize stuff basically to stop them, like I say, seizing on. You need that as well as the piston to move freely. You need these to slide freely for the brakes to operate well. So as I say, I've been so far unable to identify what these calipers and pads are, which is very annoying. It's not the end of the world, because if the pads ever need replacing, you can just get these resurfaced. So those are just riveted on, so you can just get some new brake material, drill those out and put some new stuff on. But you just put a bit of the slip. Obviously you don't want to get it on the pad surface, but just on the bits that contact with the piston and the caliper, just to prevent them ever seizing on. It also reduces noise, but you're doing the future owner of the vehicle a bit of a favour by making sure you've got anti-seize on these components. So yeah, now what we need to do is get the caliper back on. You notice I've got a little shandy bottle there, just on the brake pipe, just to stop any brake fluid leaking everywhere. So I'll just kind of get that out of the way for now before we reconnect that. So let's pop these brakes back in. Apologies, I think I knocked you over then. So once you've got this in here, you basically hammer this slide in over this bottom part of the caliper, and that holds everything together. And then there's a retaining bolt, so it's going to get a little hammer, and we can hammer that across until that hole lines up with that hole, and that holds everything together, and hopefully we're going to be free moving. Okay, so that's everything back together, the line reconnected, and yeah, we're moving, which is great. Obviously the proof will be when I've bled it up and put the brakes on to make sure they come back on again, but certainly compared to what it was before we started this, we've got some movement there, which is fantastic. And yeah, good to know that the calipers had a little refresh. So we've finally got some good temperature here in Bedford, and we're getting close to the point when we'll be ready to put this back on. So what I'm going to do is clean this all off, blow it off with an airline tack cloth, wipe it down with acetone, and then we're going to be spraying the underside of this. It's really solid, but I just want to give it that protection that we've given to the chassis. So yeah, I will blow it down, get it prepped, and then spray it up with the chassis paint. All right, so that's it masked off, wiped down, blown off of air. And yeah, I'm going to load up the paint gun with the chassis paint, thin it down a bit, and blast it. All right, so a couple of days to dry, and it's looking good. That's going to be, again, good for another 60 years. That paint goes on really nicely, and it was good to spray it on, get into all the nooks and crannies. So we're getting close to the point where we'll be able to put this back on the bed. I just need to rally the troops because this thing weighs a ton. But yeah, really excited to finish up the wiring, etc. at the back of the truck, and then this can go on, and then we're getting close, folks. We're gonna do some wiring. So what I've done is I've gone to the bed and I've removed the tail lights, the number plate light, and what was left of the loom up there. Currently we have headlights, but we don't have indicators. And I'm not sure, but I'm sure I've had on other vehicles where when the rear indicators aren't plugged in, it doesn't work. So I want to eliminate that as the reason why the indicators don't work before I start digging into switches and stuff like that, because indicators are a bit of a mystery to me. It took me about a day to get them working on a Beetle a while ago. So what I'm going to basically do as well is rebuild the rear loom for the lights, because we have the connectors here, but someone has cleverly chopped off the connectors there. So I want to tidy this all up, so when it comes to fitting the bed back on, we can just plug the loom in rather than it be a case of lying underneath it and trying to scratch around plugging stuff in. So I'm going to need to fit some new connectors and stuff like that too, but I also just want to make sure that everything is wired in. So I have the wiring diagram for the vehicle, so I can identify what all the coloured wires mean, and they all seem pretty original. So I'll be able to follow those, albeit it does look like it's been chopped into a bit here and there. But I want to tidy this up, get it wrapped up nicely, and get all the rear lights working. So like I say, it's a plug and play system when we put the bed back on. So I did already notice a broken bulb there, so we can fix that and see if we can get it lighting up like a Christmas tree. So I've stripped back all the loom, got off all the old string and stuff, cleaned them up with alcohol a bit so I can see the colours a bit better. It's quite cathartic, I think, amongst all the big, heavy, noisy stuff that you do over there. It's quite nice to just sit down quietly and piece something together and, you know, go back through the old wiring. So I've found the connectors that are in there, and it's clear where they kind of link to that loom. So what I'm going to do is actually fit some connectors, because I don't have the other ends to these, so I'm going to cut these off and put new connectors on. So like I say, so it can just be plugged and played. So delicate, sort of slow work, I suppose, really, but it will pay off in the long run, and we can get it all in a good place. Okay, so we have some progress with the wiring. Now, if I put on the headlights, headlights are on, and we have side lights at the back as well. So because I've just earthed them to where the compressor's earthed, it's not that strong a earth, I suppose, so that's why they're not too bright, but that's good. Unfortunately, we still have nothing on the indicators, but I don't know if you can see, there's a slight flicker when I do it, which would suggest it is connected to something. So I'm wondering whether the flasher relay is bad. So what I'm going to do is jump the flasher relay, and if I do that, the indicators should all come on, which would indicate that the flasher relay is bad. So I'm going to do that and see if it's the relay, then I can swap that out. If not, it's going to take some more digging, which I'm not looking forward to because I hate doing indicators. Okay, so the plot thickens slightly. When I've got a power probe, if you are ever doing electrics, if you can get yourself one of these, I think I got it off Amazon or something like that for maybe 20 quid. And what you do is connect it. There's two crocodile clips that connect to the battery. And then what you can do is you can basically attach the power probe to anything, and you can basically send 12 volts to it. So not something to do on a modern car because you might fry CAN bus, but on a car like this, it's great for testing out components. So when I force 12 volts to that, when I indicate left and I force 12 volts, the left indicator turns on. When I indicate right, force 12 volts, the right indicator comes on. So it suggests the switch gear in the stalk is functioning, which is great. But potentially it means that the flasher relay isn't working. So what I'm going to do is switch that out and see if that gets us anywhere. If not, it might be somewhere in this circuit there's not 12 volts traveling through it. So it might be, I don't know about a fuse. I've looked at the fuses. There's only one fuse missing that doesn't look good, and that's for the heater. So yeah, but worth a try, I suppose. All right, so new camera's now hopefully I'm getting to grips with, and I now have a microphone, so hopefully this improves the sound quality as well. But I'm going to do a nice upgrade now to the vehicle as I'm moving around, just like I say, finally getting to the point of ticking off there's some of the final jobs really. It does feel like we're getting close. So the headlights on this are kind of fixed headlights, these 7-inch headlight bulbs, and that's a pretty standard size. So what we want to do is obviously make them suitable for the UK roads. So and also there's a sort of legal requirement with the side lights on American vehicles. If you pull the headlight switch out to the first position, it puts the side lights on, which you don't really use that much with classic vehicles, but nonetheless, when you do that, it will actually use the indicators as the side lights. So you get 2 orange lights as the side markers. That's not what we do in the UK. So we need to do a little bit of jiggery pokery to change that. So I've got this nice upgrade. So rather than having these kind of fixed headlights, I've got these halogen headlights. So this will upgrade the bulb to a halogen, which obviously improves the headlight, but also this has the addition of having this small bulb here, which is a side light. So quite a simple process. It is plug and play for the bulb, which is great. But what I do need to do is dig into the wiring and find the, there's 2 wires that go to the indicators, one obviously that controls the indication and one that controls the side lights. So I just need to tap into that, disconnect that from the indicators, and then instead plug that into this small little bulb in here as well. Then we can fit that in, put the headlights back together, and we should be legal for the UK roads. So I'm going to dig into that now and we'll see how we get on. So taking a closer look at the wiring here, referring to the wiring diagram, this black with yellow stripe is the wire we want. And what you can see is it's actually already been tapped into with this purple wire. And that confused me for a while as to what that is. But what it actually does is goes to the air ride system, so that when the side lights are turned on, it dims the lights on the controls in there like a nighttime mode. And on the instructions, it says to tap it into the headlight. And what someone's done at some point is, rather than tap it in somewhere conveniently in the cab or over here, they've actually, for some reason, come all the way from right the way down there over here. I've already put it into the wiring loom here because I wasn't sure what it was, and tapped it in here, which is a strange decision. But like my friend Danny said, you know, if someone isn't mega comfortable, familiar with vehicle electrics, and it says tap it into the headlight, they just kind of did that literally. So what it means I can do is just unplug this side of the spade connector here, and then I can add a new spade connector to the purple one and to the one that I'm going to run to the new side light here, and kind of kill 2 birds with one stone. So it'll stop the side light connection going to the indicator, but also it'll still retain that purple wire as well. And then the other side of it is just the earth. There's just a small black cable here which just taps into the sort of firewall there as an earth, so I can just again tap into that. That will go onto there, then we'll plug that in, screw it all back together. Happy days. Right, headlight. And side light. Lovely job. So the groundwork's now been done with the wiring. The rear loom has been rebuilt, as you've seen. The headlights have been converted. I've wired in the new electric fan, horn, pretty much made sure everything's in position so that I can now come in here and start to work out what's going on under the dash here. Now, we've still been encountering some problems. I put in a new flasher relay, and if you force 12 volts to it, you can get it to work, but running just off the standard truck wiring, it's still not working. And after some digging, and with the help of my friend Mad Danny, who came along the other day, we found that there's a significant voltage drop in the circuit. So when you get to the fuse box, there is full battery voltage going into it, so between 12 and 13 volts. But coming out of it, it drops down to like 5 volts, which isn't enough to power things like indicators, things like the brake light, which we now know works as well. I don't know if you remember, I fixed that ages ago when I was connecting up the new brake cylinder. And looking at the wiring under here, happily, the original wiring is mostly intact, so it has been pretty much untouched, which is great because it still relates back to the original wiring diagram. But some of the stuff that's been tapped into it afterwards, things like the air ride system, and things like these additional gauges. I'm not sure if you remember, it has this tacho gauge here, and it had a 3-pod gauge under there, which was actually pretty much not connected. Some of that stuff was not wired in great, wired straight off the ignition switch and stuff like that. So the air ride is wired straight off the ignition switch. So after some reflection and wanting to do as good a job as I can, even after cleaning up the original fuse board, we're still getting that voltage drop. So it's obviously very tired, and it has old glass fuses as well. What I'm going to do is modernize the wiring system by putting in a new fuse box. So this fuse box, what I can do is take everything out of the old one, wire it all into here, and be able to label it up nicely for the new owner, and also wire in the additional things that are going to be in here, things like the air ride, things like the stereo, and any additional things that someone will want to wire in. So I will probably look to replacing these gauges. I'm not sure about the tacho because it's got a shift gauge, and this is automatic, and once I realized that, I was like, that's odd. So that's probably going to go. What I want to do is try and use as many of the gauges in the original dash as possible. However, we have found there's a problem with that as well, because there's a broken coil on the back of this, which Danny's going to try and fix and refurbish, because what we would like to do is retain as many of these as possible. Obviously, we've put in a new fuel sender, so we want to use the fuel gauge. The altmeter is still working, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get things like the temperature and oil right, because obviously it's got a Chevy engine in there as well. So we'll dig into that and get as much of that working as possible, but it might be that I get a new one of these. These are broken anyway, so they would have never have worked. So maybe I'll get a new one of these and wire in a new oil pressure sensor, new water temperature sensor, and put that in. They're relatively inexpensive, but again, what we want to do is be able to wire it in properly, and not just sort of robustly or crudely tap into the original wiring. So it's going to be quite a long job, but yeah, I'm going to pull out the original fuse box, put this in, and then we know everything's getting good voltage, and like I say, we can get anything new on there on a proper fused connection rather than just tapping into old wiring, which might put too much load on it, and obviously there's a risk that it corrodes and breaks somewhere, and we don't want that for the new owner. We want them to know that everything works and works reliably. So yeah, quite a big job to do here, but one that's worthwhile. So I'm gonna get stuck in, get some tools, and put myself in the awkward position of lying down under here for probably a few hours. So good thoughts for my back, please, and let's see what we can do. So here is the original fuse board here. It's only a little one, but you can see how corroded it is, and well worthy of replacing. So yeah, I'm going to pull that out, and basically I need to sit down with a pen and paper and work out what all these wires do and make notes and label them so that it'll go back together properly. The way the fuse board works, the new one, is you have one side of this has all your inputs basically, and you just put jumpers. So you put one live to it and then jumpers down all the different terminals, and then the other side everything else wires into, and you can label them all up on these boxes here. What we're going to do, because the original fuse board had some switched lives on it and some permanent lives, which is why I can't, sometimes you can just get one where there's one positive input and it just goes to all of them, which is a bit neater, but I want to be able to choose if it's switched, so it comes on with the ignition, or if it's permanently live, in case we want to use that for things like stereo that needs a permanent live feed. So yeah, I'm going to work out which one of these is the input of live, which one is the switched input of live, label those up and put those to the right hand side of this fuse board, and then wire all of the other wires to the left hand side of it, and depending on where if I want them to be switched or permanent, and yeah, get that all fixed in, and we can then neatly put that at the back there, and yeah, just modernize the system and make sure it's reliable. Okay, so after a couple of hours of work, I'm happy to say that the new fuse board is now in. Let's take a look. So under here, you'll see, hopefully you can see that, everything's wired in. I still need to tidy it up a little bit, but I've boxed it all up and labeled everything, and I'm happy to say that now everything has a really good 12-volt feed. What that now means is that we've got a number of things working that didn't work before. We've got some dash lights, we have the stereo is now in, we have indicators, fans, the washer bottle is now working off the original switch. So yeah, well worth spending that bit of time doing, and it wasn't as hard as you think. Okay, so indicators, as I've said, have been the bane of my life, but they are finally now working. But I had to do one final job. On US spec indicators, if you look at the tail light like this, what you have is your sort of side light, brake light and indicator, all the same thing. So to indicate, it just flashes red, which isn't legal on UK roads. So I've had to make it so what does have the provision for a reverse light, which you don't need on a vehicle of this age. So what I've done is done a conversion where this is now the indicator, and I'll put an orange bulb in there, and this is your brake light and side light. To do that, it wasn't just a simple case of replacing the pins, because the signal for the indicators and the brake light both go down the same circuit. So it's a bit complicated. I try and say it out loud, but what I had to do was isolate the brake signal from the indicator circuit. So the indicator circuit I have just repinned at this end to the reverse lights, and then at the other end what I did was send the brake pedal light down the reverse light circuit. It had been cut off anyway, because when the conversion had done they must not have used it, and I don't know if there's provision for it, but we don't need it anyway. So yeah, so I just reconnected the brake light switch down the reverse light wire, and then just switch them around on the pins down here. So now we have separate indicators to brake lights, and everything's working basically. So what a relief. So happy to have got that job done. So I do just want to take a moment to look at how beautiful this looks. So I toyed with what to do with the steering wheel. The horn push was missing, so I thought I'd either need to replace that or get a new steering wheel. The horn push cost me like 85 quid or something like that. It was hideously expensive, but I think I like the original one, and by the time I got a new boss and everything like that, it would have probably worked out about the same anyway. So I thought, let's keep original. And do you know what? I'm so glad I did, because we were looking at wiring in the horn. So we knew the horn circuit was working, because when we sent 12 volts down here, we were getting the new horn to beep. However, the wiring between the base of the steering column and up here was broken. So we weren't getting 12 volts to the horn ring up here. And so I tried to remove the steering wheel using a puller. And believe me when I say, no steering wheel has ever been stuck on as solidly as this. And with it being Bakelite original wheel, we didn't want to force it. So instead, what I've had to do is just wire up the horn down to a little horn button down here. It's got a picture of a horn on it, and we now have a horn. So that's fine, but I'm glad we've still got the D-ring back on there, because I think that looks fantastic. And you'll notice that I also have installed the kind of gear signal thing there as well, and I think that really finishes it off. And barring putting the seats in, I've installed some new seat belts ready, so seats will go back in, and we're not far off finished in here. The stereo is now wired up, so I'll need to look at speakers when the seats are back in and where I'm going to put them, and potentially some new gauges to replace the crappy old ones that were in there. But other than that, it's looking great in here. So now we know all the wiring and everything is working. I've been able to start tidying everything up under here. So wrapping it up with loom tape. I've run the hose for the washers. Just starting to get the HT leads to make sure they're not contacting with the headers. I've still got a bit of work to do down here. I could potentially do with the bracket, but certainly better than it was. And likewise down this side, I think it's looking much neater and tidier. Like I say, all the loom is now in tape, and yeah, just helps to prevent any kind of damage and things rattling around, as well as making it look even smarter in here. So fantastic week's work. So some big ticket items finished on the truck this week in what is the penultimate F100 video. Having the wiring done, getting under the bed painted were two things that, you know, were the last two big jobs, I suppose. Rebuilding the calipers, we now know all the brakes are good. Everything's looking shipshape and Bristol fashion. So this, like I say, is the penultimate video on the F100 builds. The next video I release will be it on the road. So I need to start the process now of getting this thing registered, putting the bed back on, servicing it, bleeding the cooling system and all those things. So you will see that as and when it's ready. But I've already started getting inquiries. If you're interested in purchasing this truck, it's going to be £15,000. And I think you'll agree that is a great price for a fantastic truck. Next week, so tomorrow I'm going to the NSRA Southern Swap Meet. If you're going to be there and you see me, come and say hello. I'm going to have stickers in my pocket, and I'll give stickers to anyone who comes and says hello. It's going to be a fun day out. I don't really have any money to spend anything, but I want to explore and share that with you in a video next week. We'll then be looking at moving on to other projects while the work in the background to get this registered is going on before doing the final video on this. So hopefully some more quick fire, interesting one-off videos over the next few weeks. So please do stay tuned. And if you, like I say, if you're at the NSRA Swap Meet tomorrow, come and say hi, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.